Facing the unknown is the risk we take for joy. Facing the unknown is the risk that we take for joy. Welcome back to the pod, guys. Welcome back to the pod. I'm so glad that you're here joining me today. And today I'm talking to you about something that has been floating around in my brain ever since I was in Australia with my dad when I first realized it, right up until literally this morning. I'm going to start off with two stories. I'm going to talk to you about two studies and then see where this conversation takes me and my brain. So, the first story. My dad and I are in Australia and it's the first day. And before we go to the tournament, of course, we need to go study. So, we need a coffee shop to go study in. And my dad finds this awesome, cozy, the vibes are just immaculate coffee shop. It's like everything I want in a coffee shop, right? If you know me, I don't really care about the coffee taste per se, the food, if it's good, bonus, but really it's about the vibes. If it's dark, if it's cozy, if it's comfortable, if there's a nice table to work at, preferably if there's outlets, just a comfortable place. And we liked it. Then the second day comes around and we are once again looking for a place to go study. And I am the one who is on maps finding a place. And immediately, of course, I have this desire to just go back to the same one. Just go back to the same coffee shop. We already knew that we liked it. We knew that's the key here. We already knew that we liked it. We knew what to expect. And I pushed myself a little bit in that moment to say, no, let me find a new coffee shop. We're in a Melbourne of all places. We are on the other side of the world. Let me find a new place for us to go. And even though it's the same thing that him and I always do, he's working on his Greek classes, I'm making videos for 50 for Fuel and studying for paramedic school. We're doing the same thing, but we do it in new places. We do it in fun new places. And so I pushed myself to find a new coffee shop. And this coffee shop was good, but obviously you can tell by the way I'm talking about it, it did not have the immaculate vibes as the first one. And there was a brief moment where I was like, maybe going to that first one would have been better. But the thing is that was going into the unknown. Going into the unknown, you face the risk of maybe not liking it. But the thing is in the very same magnitude, you have the risk of not liking it. You also have the risk of liking it, of joy, of discovering a new place and the things along the way. And it's not to say that the second coffee shop was bad. It just, I think when you go somewhere really nice, it's kind of even hard to live up to your past experiences. And that's why it can also be hard going into the unknown, because you're thinking, what can possibly top what I've already done? The thing is that you have to take that risk for life to surprise you. So that is the story, the situation that triggered this formulated thought about how facing the unknown is the risk that we take for happiness. Number two. So if you don't know, 50 for Fuel hit $1,000 today. And you're thinking, Anya, you're recording this on a Monday if you're that up to date with my life? Yes, I am. I'm re-recording this because I filmed this on Saturday and I really needed to rework this and get my point across better. So it actually really worked out because, yes, it is Monday. You're hearing this Tuesday morning if you're listening to it when it came out. Today, 50 for Fuel hit $1,000. And to be candid with you, after $500, I did not think I was going to get any more donations. I was like, who else in the world is going to donate? And yeah, I was like racking my brain trying to figure out new and creative ways to donate. I put flyers up over campus and now it begins the next phase of, okay, what do I do now that we raised $1,000 for the Eating Disorder Foundation, which, I'm like saying it very just straight, like flat tone here, but I was elated this morning, you guys. It's to the point of what I'm getting at. This whole ultra thing, of course, there there is this thought of what if I can't do it? When I set out to run my first ultra, I was thinking, how in the world am I going to run 31 miles? And when I first signed up for this ultra back in November of 2025, I didn't even tell anybody when I signed up for, I mean, actually, I didn't tell anybody until I told my family about 50 for Fuel. Actually, yeah, I kept it to myself from November to literally New Year's. We were celebrating New Year's, and that's when I told my family that I was running this 50-mile race. And concurrently, I said that I was making it a fundraiser for the Eating Disorder Foundation. So I kept it to myself in part because, I mean, it was the last day before registration prices went up. And I was like, if the cost is going to increase even more, and I'm already having hesitations about doing this, like the cost increasing is not going to help me wanting to do it. So I just pulled the trigger the last day that before the prices rose, and I signed up, and then I shut my computer, and I didn't even think about the fact of what I had just signed up for, right? And so it was this big unknown, like, can I do this? And that was kind of exactly the point, because I was thinking, I don't, I doubt if I can do this. Like I was doubting in that moment if I could do it, if I could run 50 miles. And because when I finished the 30 miles, I felt that I had more in me. And I mean, going into the 30-mile race, the thing is that I had already run a marathon, and I already run just in my free time 30 miles. So I kind of knew that I could already do 31, you know what I mean? But 50, like that was the number to me in my head when it actually would start getting a little bit like more satisfactory to me, because that seemed like more of a stretch goal. But to be candid with you, I was like, I can sign up for this and then I can tell nobody. And then if I don't want to do it, nobody knows. And so that's kind of how it turned into, this fundraiser. Okay, I'm getting kind of on a tangent. That was a real tangent. My point is facing the unknown. So then I make it a fundraiser, and I'm thinking, how in the world I'm going to raise $1,000? And then that's an unknown. But going into the unknown, out of that, there's been so much joy in the fact of the connections that I have made, and specifically with one individual who I never would have discussed these kind of topics with if it hadn't been for this specific fundraiser and situation and connection to running. Like, there's no way that we would have talked about this in this way if it hadn't been for me stepping into the unknown, doing something that one, can I even run 50 miles? Two, can I even raise $1,000? Going into the unknown is the risk that we take for this joy that we can get. And it feels very apt and very profound for it to happen today, right when I was going to re-record this episode, because it's a reminder that the comfort zone, it's called comfort for a reason. I mean, even another example, I work from home every single day, and it's more of an effort to go out and find a place to work from. But there's always been this innate need in me. And actually, I want to hesitate. I don't even want to say innate. I think I've been so fortunate. I recognize how fortunate I've been that my parents took me traveling so much as a kid. I mean, now that I'm 25, I have seen almost every single state, or I have an idea of like every part of the US, what it's like. And now, we're expanding more to going to different countries. And I think I have really kept that sense of exploring and adventure. And I really, really thank my parents for the time and the resources that they put into exposing me to so many different places, because it is part of the reason it encouraged me to go out of state for my undergrad degree, which in that I had great experiences where I lived in Connecticut for 8 months, and then I lived in Paris for 6 months. And then after that, I went down to Texas and I lived there for a couple of years. And then now I'm here in Colorado. And so I've experienced all these different ways of life. And the thing about life is we do similar things no matter where we are. We go to the grocery store, we go to the gym, we play tennis, we talk to our friends, we go out with friends, we do all those same things. But the fact that I have been able to have meaningful experiences in so many different places, just the environment has changed, and that just naturally creates different variations. And this leads well into a study that I'll talk about later. And it's this need for novelty. We have this way of that novel situations can bring us happiness. And I also started to think about how we have these innate brain systems, the dopamine system, which is the molecule of motivation. People sometimes think it's the molecule of happiness, which I think it's kind of related, but it's really the molecule of motivation. And what's interesting is that we have a baseline level of dopamine. And when you experience something that spikes your dopamine, something you're excited for, anything that spikes the dopamine, when it returns to baseline, it actually takes a dip below baseline before returning to that baseline level. And you might think, why? Why would our brain dip below baseline after we have experienced something good? And the reason is, and it's to keep us pursuing, keep us seeking. Because if ancient humans, once they had found the deer and ate it all and they were just content, they wouldn't go out for the next hunt to find the next however many months of food. Same thing with finding a mate. If you didn't have that drive to go find somebody to reproduce with, you would not have offspring. So I knew kind of in the back of my head, we already had these brain systems that contributed to us pursuing, to seeking. And I translated that into, I wonder if there's a connection here with novel situations. And so going back to the working from home or studying, it's like, it takes effort to get out of your apartment, to get out of your house. It takes effort to get out of your house, especially when you've cultivated a house in a space that you like, which is a luxury in and itself. Like, going out and seeking something is a luxury, because if you think about it, if somebody was in an unsafe situation out and about, or ancient humans were in a place in danger, of course, if they find a place that's safe, they're not gonna leave. That makes no physiological sense. But we, in this day and age, are afforded the luxury of having a safe place, having safe third spaces, right? So first space is your home, second space is your work, and then, or like what you do. And then third space is all this space in between where we commingle and everything. Maybe the Agora. That one's for you, Papa. So, right, it is a luxury, right? So being able to go out to a new coffee shop, it's still the same thing that I'm doing, but I get this, and you risk it. Sometimes there's not an outlet. Sometimes there's not a good place to work. Sometimes there's no internet. Sometimes there's not a nice table. Sometimes it's loud, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm home, I know that I'm going to have my nice big monitors. I'm going to have all my food. I'm going to be in my comfy clothes. I know exactly what I know exactly what the environment is going to be, but I just get bored. I just get bored after being in the same place for so many days. And so I even I have to remind myself to get out and try a new place. Like, it's so fun. I talked about in the previous episode how one of my favorite things is doing an intense workout in the morning and then going into Denver or whatever city I'm in. I would do this all the time in Texas as well. I was always going to new places. So going to Denver or Boulder or another city around here and finding a new coffee shop to work in, I just get so much satisfaction of actually getting out. And I'm so happy every time I get out and I do it. And this is just a reminder to you, get out of the routine, get out, because that risk that people are so, I'm people too. Okay. I'm not immune to this. People are so, they have this propensity for comfort. We always want to be so comfortable, but facing the unknown is a risk. But on the other side of that risk is joy, is contentment, is fulfillment, is exploring new things. Like we have this part of our brain. And so I looked into what studies there are on this, because also thinking about a 9-month one-way trip to Mars, and even like on the order of 2-3 years there, like the whole trip, I think about these humans sitting in this can for 9 months at a time and what that is going to do psychologically. And there's a whole field of bioastronautics that is tied to understanding the psychological effects of something like that. Not something I am particularly interested in pursuing my studies further. However, it is super interesting, and this topic just got me thinking of the psychological need for novelty. And so, but then at the same time, it's interesting because in our brain systems we have this way of just going to the default, of going to the same grocery store, to picking the same food. And if we have a bunch of choices, either we don't make a choice or we just always go with the same thing. And so I looked into some studies on this, and there was a study done on the status quo, and they defined the status quo as the suboptimal acceptance of a default choice option. And it was actually very on brand, because they had this example with tennis and calling balls in or out. And so people were pressing the in button and they had to switch to an opposite button to call the ball out. And this is actually how real life, like not a computer, but a person line judge do it. The ball is assumed in until it's out. And so to make a long story short, and I will link this study in the description, they found that there was a shift towards the status quo on high difficulty trials, but not on low difficulty trials. So to say it again, they tend, when it was a difficult line call, they tended towards sticking to the status quo, which was calling the ball in versus calling the ball out. And so I think we've all experienced this. We all have this default of just wanting to be home, or and that, like, trips are quote a hassle, right? Like going out and exploring a new place is a hassle. And so these people were also in a brain scanner, and an MRI data showed that rejecting the status quo activated a part of the brain called the subthalamic nucleus. And this is the part of the brain that's involved in inhibiting default responses and initiating change. So this part of the brain had to light up to make the other choice, which is super interesting. On a physiological level, there is a difference between sticking with the status quo versus changing. And so, but then I also thought, okay, there's also this need for novelty that I experience. So what do some studies say about that? And so I found this one that challenge. So there's this thing called self-determination theory, and it outlines three needs of three psychological needs for contentment. And those are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So autonomy is feeling like we are in control. Competence is feeling as though we can master a task. And relatedness is how connected we feel to those around us. And so they call this a living theory because this theory is still in work. Things can change. And so this study suggests that novelty should be added to that list. And novelty in this study is defined as the need to experience something not previously experienced or deviates from everyday routine. So basically the study found through a regression analysis that novelty could be a predictor of life satisfaction independent of the other need for satisfaction variables. Again, I will link this study in the description. So it's very interesting here, this interplay, and there's probably so many other studies that could compare, contrast these two needs. And so it's just interesting, this interplay in our heads of our brains and bodies of seeking comfort, because that on one hand makes sense safety wise in ancient humans, but then also we have this need or like novelty and adventure seeking also can bring more satisfaction to our lives. And so today on Pursuit, I'm here to remind you to keep pursuing, to keep taking the risk of a situation not being ideal, because on the other side of that risk, just like everything is good and bad at the same time, which we've talked about, this is one of those situations where that risk is good and bad. And so take a calculated risk. If you need to grind and get something done and you can't afford in that moment to handle those unpredicted variables, if you have an assignment due or a work project due and you don't want to add complexity to the already complex problem that you have of, oh, what if there's not an outlet in my computer dies? Obviously no. Like in those, it's a calculated risk. It's a calculated risk. I'm going to go out, do this, go explore this new place, or I'm going to take on this physical challenge, or I'm going to take on this mental challenge, or, something like that. Because on the other side of that, just as much as you're risking it not working out, you're also giving yourself the opportunity of it working out and achieving something or experience something truly great and truly fulfilling in your life. And so that's what I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for listening. In terms of other updates for the pod, we have some great episodes coming out in my You're Not Alone series with 2 individuals who I recently interviewed. So those are going through the approvals, and I'm very excited to share those. And in the meantime, I will just keep thinking up these topics and sharing. I appreciate you listening. This is a great way, for a long form way for me to express my thoughts here. And so always appreciate you listening, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.